Oh, hey, you made it. Come on in, get comfortable. The story I have for you tonight, it's a dark one. It's about a world ending and the man who decides to keep what's left for himself. If this feels like the kind of place you've been looking for, maybe hit subscribe so we can find our way back here again. Now, listen. He came to erase my world. He took me instead. In the scriptorium, silence was not an absence of sound. It was a presence. It had texture, weight, and 1,000 years of secrets pressed into its core. Lyra had been born into it, shaped by it, but today it felt like a physical pressure against her skin, a hand closing gently around her throat. The High Chronicler's summons had been a whisper on the psychic currents, a command that brooked no delay. And so she stood in the Axis Mundi, the heart of their world, feeling impossibly small. Her pulse, traitorously, was a frantic bird beating against the cage of her ribs. She hated that Thuron could likely feel it, could read its frantic rhythm as easily as he read the ancient texts that were their scripture. He was her mentor, the closest thing she had to a father, but in this sanctum, he was only his title, the unwavering anchor of their faith.
The Concord weakens Lyra.
His voice didn't echo in the cavernous space. It was absorbed by the books, by the silence itself. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the finality of a death sentence.
I felt the tremors, a faint dissonance in the eastern ley lines. I had thought it was a solar flare.
A lie, and they both knew it. She had felt the rot for weeks, a sickening sour note in the symphony of the timeline, a thread pulling loose from the great tapestry. To admit it would be to admit fear. In the scriptorium, fear was a sin second only to curiosity.
The Eidolon grow bold. They gnaw at the foundations of our peace, like rats in the walls of the world.
He turned, and the light from the oculus caught the gold threads in his robes, making them blaze. His eyes, a piercing, glacial blue, pinned her in place. They were the eyes of a man who had never once known doubt.
The Elder Council is concerned. They question if a keystone of your youth is equal to such a task.
The unspoken threat hung in the air between them. Prove them wrong. Prove yourself worthy. The political gears were always grinding, even here. Her position, her very life, was contingent on her power.
My age has no bearing on my strength, High Chronicler. The power of the Keystone is absolute, or it is nothing.
Good.
He stepped toward her, his long shadow retreating. He reached out, not to touch her, but to adjust the fall of her severe gray robe at the shoulder, a small, paternal gesture that felt more like a brand. His fingers were cold, dry as parchment.
1,000 years ago, your ancestors spilled their blood to forge the last Concord. They gave their lives to give us this age of peace, this fragile balance. All we must do is hold the line. All you must do.
The weight of it settled on her. Not a request, a sacrament.
I understand the duty.
Do you, child? The memory of the Concord is not merely a record. It is a law. It is the cage that holds back the monsters. You are its warden. If you fail, the old wars return. The unwritten court will feast on the ruins of everything we have built.
I will not fail.
He smiled then, a thin, bloodless expression that did not reach his eyes. It was the smile of a priest blessing a sacrifice.
Go to the sanctum of the first dawn. Reinforce the anchor. Make it inviolate. Let the Eidolon break their teeth upon the truth you defend. Show them the strength of the scriptorium.
He stepped back into the light, becoming a silhouette once more. A symbol. Dismissed, Lyra turned. The long walk back through the shadowed stacks felt different now. The silence no longer felt like peace. It felt like a tomb waiting. The sanctum of the first dawn was a lie. It was a ruin, a grave. Lyra had always known its location, a point on a map in her mind, but to stand here was to feel the lie in her bones. The scriptorium taught that the Concord was a living, breathing thing. This place felt like a monument to something dead. The air was heavy, stagnant, and beneath the steady, golden hum of the anchor, she felt it again, the sour note. A subtle wrongness, like a string on a harp tuned a fraction too low, vibrating with a dissonant frequency that set her nerves on edge. She closed her eyes, extending her senses, letting her consciousness brush against the memory's psychic structure. It was vast, complex, a latticework of a million intentions, sacrifices, and desperate hopes. But at its core, something was coiled, something sick, a darkness that did not belong. It felt walled off. A psychic tumor hidden beneath layers of sanctified memory. Her training screamed at her to ignore it, to reinforce the outer walls as instructed, to trust in the wisdom of the chroniclers before her. But her instincts, the part of her that was pure Keystone, recoiled.
What are you?
The shadows in the ruined nave deepened. It was not a trick of the fading light. They pooled in the corners, thickened in the archways, detaching from the ancient stone like spilled ink. They had no sound, no scent of their own, only a profound and sudden absence of warmth. They bled the heat from the air. The first one moved. Not a man, but a suggestion of one, a form of solidified night, silent and impossibly fast. It flowed across the flagstones, and Lyra reacted on instinct. She slammed a palm down on the altar. Golden light erupted, a concussive wave of psychic force that threw the shadow creature back, causing it to dissolve into shrieking motes of darkness before vanishing. Another came from her left, and another from behind the crumbling chancel. They were Eidolon foot soldiers, wraiths. The scriptorium's nursery boogamen made manifest. They extinguished the holy light of the anchor wherever they touched, their darkness a devouring void. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was a keystone, a living fulcrum of reality, not a soldier. She erected a shimmering shield of wool around herself and the altar, the golden light of her power holding the encroaching darkness at bay. The wraiths pressed against it, silent, their featureless faces contorting the light. They were testing her, draining her. This wasn't a raid. It was a siege, and she was alone. The silence of the attack was the most terrifying part. There were no war cries, no clang of steel, just the soft, insistent pressure of utter annihilation. And then the pressure ceased. The wraiths drew back, melting into the deeper shadows of the cathedral, their forms dissolving as if in deference. They parted, creating a path from the shattered main doors to the altar, a path for their master. He was not a creature of shadow like his soldiers. He was the darkness given devastating form. Where they were absences of light, he was a concentration of it, a black hole in a bespoke coat. His beauty was a weapon in itself, sharp, severe, and utterly without warmth. It was the beauty of a glacier, of a perfectly honed blade. He stopped 20 feet from her shield, his hands clasped loosely behind his back, his posture one of bored arrogance. Only the stillness of him, the coiled, predatory energy, betrayed the threat.
A keystone, they sent one so young. Has the scriptorium grown that desperate, or merely that sentimental?
His voice was a deep, velvet baritone, laced with the faintest, almost untraceable accent of a language long dead. It was the voice of gravestones and forgotten empires. It slid over her skin and raised every hair on her arms.
I am all the strength the scriptorium needs to deal with scavengers like you.
Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. Her insides may have been a knot of cold dread, but her voice would not betray her.
Scavengers.
He tilted his head, a gesture of mild curiosity that was somehow more insulting than any overt threat. His golden eyes swept over her, not as a man looks at a woman, but as a scholar examines a particularly curious artifact.
You stand guard over a festering wound, little scribe, and call it a holy relic. You have no idea what it is you're defending, do you?
I defend the peace 1,000 years of your victims died for. I defend history.
You defend a singular approved text. History is a library, not a single page. And this page...
She could feel the truth of his words resonating with the wrongness she'd sensed in the anchor. The thought was a heresy. She crushed it, reinforcing her convictions and, by extension, her shield.
Get out of this place, vampire, or be unmade.
He smiled then, a slow, devastating curve of his lips that held no humor, only a profound and ancient weariness. It was a smile that said he had heard this threat 1,000 times from 1,000 worlds, and he was still standing.
Such fire. The scriptorium trains you to be martyrs, but they can't quite extinguish the spark, can they? Very well. Let's see what this relic is truly made of.
He didn't draw a weapon, He didn't lunge. He simply lifted a hand, palm open. From his fingertips, darkness began to bleed into the air. Not the thin, wraith-like shadows of his soldiers, but a tangible, devouring void. An absence that drank the moonlight and pulled at the edges of her golden shield, causing it to flicker and groan under the strain. He wasn't attacking her. He was preparing to consume the memory itself. Lyra screamed, not in fear, but in exertion. She poured every ounce of her will, her life force, into the anchor. Her Keystone power surged, a supernova of psychic energy intended to reinforce the memory, to make it an unbreakable, absolute law of the universe. I will not fail. The command from Thuron, from her ancestors, from her own terrified heart, drove her. The golden light of her shield intensified, pushing back against the encroaching void. At the exact same moment, Kaelen struck. His power was the antithesis of hers, not creation but consumption, not anchoring but erasing. The tendrils of void latched onto the memory, seeking to devour it, to pull it out of the timeline and leave nothing but a clean, empty space. Creation and uncreation collided over the ancient stone altar. The impact was not sound. It was a psychic cataclysm, a silent, tearing shriek that ripped through the fabric of the moment. Light and shadow annihilated each other in a blast of pure paradox. For a single, eternal second, Lyra felt it. A connection. A searing, white-hot line of force snapping into place between her soul and his. It wasn't his power she felt, or his mind, but the vast, cold, unending loneliness that was the core of his being. 1,000 years of dust and echoes and loss crashed into her. At the same time, through the nascent bond, Kaelen staggered. He felt a phantom warmth on his skin, the memory of a sun he hadn't stood in for centuries. He felt the fierce, defiant, terrifying beat of her human heart. It was agony. It was revelation. The backlash threw them both back. Lyra stumbled, her vision swimming in black spots, blood trickling from her nose. Her shield shattered. The golden light of the altar sputtered and died. Kaelen was on one knee, his head bowed, a hand pressed to his own temple. He looked up, his golden eyes wide, not with triumph, but with a dawning, horrified comprehension. Shock, and something else. Something that looked unnervingly like fascination. This had never happened before. This was impossible. His soldiers, the Wraiths, began to reform in the shadows, sensing their master's distress and their enemy's weakness. They started to glide toward her. Kaelen lifted a hand, a sharp, cutting gesture, and they froze. He rose to his feet, his inhuman grace returning as he pushed through the obvious pain. He crossed the space between them in 3 silent strides. Lyra tried to summon her power, but she was spent, an empty vessel. All she could do was lift her chin, a final, useless act of defiance. He stopped directly in front of her, so close she could feel the impossible cold radiating from his body. His golden eyes searched her face, looking for an answer to a question he hadn't yet formed. He reached out, his long fingers brushing a strand of dark hair from her cheek. The touch was feather-light, yet it sent a jolt through her entire body.
Curious.
He pressed 2 fingers to her temple. The cold was absolute. Her world didn't fade to black. It was extinguished. Lyra's first sensation was silk. Her second was the profound, soul-deep chill of ancient stone. She was lying in a bed softer than any she had ever known, in a room that felt like the inside of a treasure chest or a tomb. The heavy scent of rain, salt, and old velvet filled her lungs. She sat up, her head throbbing with a dull ache. The severe gray robes of the scriptorium were gone, replaced by a simple, long-sleeved nightgown of soft, dark cotton. A quiet, humiliating intimacy. She was alive. And she was a prisoner.
You've been sleeping for 2 days. I was beginning to worry you were broken.
He said it with all the concern of a man checking on a piece of newly acquired and potentially faulty porcelain. Lyra swung her legs over the side of the bed, her bare feet meeting the cold stone floor. The chill was a welcome shock.
Where am I?
My home. More specifically, you are my guest in the fortress of Nycthamarin.
Guest is a rather polite word for captive.
Captive implies clanking chains and damp dungeons. I find them so terribly click. Besides, a captive is a commodity, a guest is a complication. And you, little scribe, are a magnificent complication.
He took a slow sip from his glass. She knew it wasn't wine. The knowledge didn't frighten her as much as it should have. Her fear was a cold, hard knot in her stomach, but her mind was already working, cataloging, analyzing.
You should have killed me.
Yes, I should have. Vesper was quite insistent on that point. It would have been the sensible, pragmatic choice.
Then why didn't you?
He set his glass down on a small table, the crystal making a soft clink against the dark wood. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the firelight carving his face into sharp planes of light and shadow.
Because when our magics collided, something unprecedented occurred, a psychic tether, a feedback loop. I felt your ridiculously stubborn heart pounding in my own chest, and you, I suspect, felt a piece of my quiet.
Quiet, that's what he called the vast, soul-crushing emptiness she'd felt, a void a millennium deep. Her hand went to her own chest, as if to make sure her heart was still her own.
A bond?
A resonance bond, a myth, a heresy according to both our doctrines, an impossibility that is currently giving me a splitting headache and a phantom craving for sunlight. It seems we have a problem, together.
He stood and walked toward the window, turning his back to her. He was giving her space, a calculated gesture of non-aggression, or a test.
The scriptorium believes I am a monster who devours history. Your mentor sent you to your death defending a lie. I am offering you the chance to learn the truth.
And what do you get in return?
Your cooperation. Help me understand the nature of this bond between us. Help me learn how to sever it, or you can remain my guest, permanently. The choice is yours, but choose wisely. I am not a patient man.
He didn't need to be. He had all the time in the world. She looked from his imposing silhouette against the storm-tossed window to the heavy wooden door of the chamber. A gilded cage was still a cage, but he had said the one word that could hold her here more surely than any lock or chain. Truth. It came without warning, a wave of emotion, so vast and powerful it felt like drowning. It was not her own. It was a cold, desolate grief, the profound loneliness of a mountain peak that has seen empires turn to dust below. It was the ache of an eternity spent watching, a despair so deep it had no bottom. It was his. The force of it stole her breath, and she gasped, pressing the heels of her hands to her eyes as if she could physically block it out. The blanket felt like no protection at all against the chill, seeping into her from the inside. Across the room, Kaelen flinched. His hand, resting on the cold stone of the mantel, clenched into a fist so tight the knuckles went white. Through the bond, a ghost of sensation, warm, bright, and utterly alien, had just washed over him. The memory of sunlight on closed eyelids, the scent of rain on summer grass, the quiet, simple joy of turning a page in a beloved book. It was hers, a fleeting echo of her life, her humanity, and it burned like acid.
Stop it.
I can't. I'm not doing anything.
She looked up at him, her gray eyes wide with a mixture of fear and accusation. His own golden eyes were narrowed, his face a mask of controlled fury. This was the bond, not just an awareness but an invasion. An open door between their minds, their souls, with no one guarding the threshold.
You need to build your shields. Your feelings are a distraction.
My feelings? I'm being drowned in 1,000 years of your existential misery. Don't you dare talk to me about distraction.
He took a step toward her, then stopped, as if an invisible wall had sprung up between them. The proximity was a danger. He could already feel her memories trying to bleed into his, a chaotic jumble of faces he didn't know, of emotions he had long since forgotten how to feel.
This is untenable. We are a vulnerability to each other, a weapon that can be used against our own people.
Then sever it. You're the great and powerful Prince of the Unwritten. Unwrite this.
If I knew how, do you think we would be having this conversation?
The anger that flashed from him was sharp and hot, but beneath it, she felt a spike of something else. A cold dread that was almost fear. He was as trapped as she was. He turned away from her, pacing the length of the room like a caged panther.
Focus, find your mental center, the core of your training. Imagine a wall, stone, ice. Whatever your ascetic masters taught you, build it now.
Lyra closed her eyes, trying to follow his command. She sought the quiet place inside herself, the silent library of her own mind. But it was no longer silent. In the furthest corner, a shadow lingered, a cold, golden-eyed presence that was not her own. She could feel him doing the same, trying to wall her out to contain the breach. It was like two prisoners trying to brick up a hole in the wall that connected their cells, their hands meeting through the gap. The effort was exhausting, the intimacy of it terrifying. For a few blessed seconds, the flood of his loneliness receded to a dull ache. The echo of her warmth in his mind faded, but the connection remained, a thin, unbreakable silver thread.
It's still there.
I know.
He was looking at her, his expression grim. They were an open book to each other, and neither of them knew how to stop reading. The air in the throne room was cold and heavy, thick with the weight of ages and unspoken power. It pressed down on Lyra, a psychic weight that made it hard to breathe. This was the heart of the unwritten court, not a court of decadence and frivolity, but a war council that had been in session for a millennium. Every vampire in the room radiated a predatory stillness, their gazes like pinpricks on her skin. She felt less like a guest and more like the main course. Kaelen's hand rested lightly on the small of her back, a gesture that could have been supportive, proprietary, or a warning to keep her from bolting. Perhaps all three.
So this is the scriptorium's great weapon. She looks breakable.
Lady Vesper's voice was like smoke and honey, but her words were shards of ice. She circled Lyra slowly, her eyes missing nothing, from the pulse beating in Lyra's throat to the way she refused to lower her gaze.
She is a Keystone, Vesper. Her resilience is not in her body, and she is not our prisoner. She is our consultant.
A consultant on what? How to properly catalogue our own extinction.
A few of the courtiers let out low, humorless chuckles. Vesper's challenge was not just to Lyra, it was to Kaelen, a test of his authority. Lyra felt a spike of Kaelen's irritation through the bond, a cold, sharp flash of anger he quickly suppressed.
I am here to understand a magical anomaly that affects us both. Nothing more.
An anomaly that you created. You came to reinforce the Concord, did you not? To strengthen the very cage that chokes us.
I came to do my duty, as you do yours.
Vesper's perfectly sculpted lips tightened. She had expected a frightened girl, not one who would meet her gaze and speak of duty.
Enough, Lyra is here under my protection. She will be treated with respect. Her insights into the workings of the Concord may be the key to our survival.
His voice, though quiet, cut through the tension in the room. It was the voice of a prince, absolute and unquestionable. The courtiers subtly shifted their posture, a silent acknowledgement of his authority. Vesper gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, her expression unreadable. But her eyes, when they met Lyra's again, were colder than ever. She saw Lyra not as a person, but as a political liability, a weakness in her prince that could be exploited by his rivals within the court. And then a new presence entered Lyra's mind. It wasn't a voice. It was a thought, ancient and dry as dust, that simply appeared there unbidden. It came from the silent figure on the throne.
The paradox seeks balance, a key for a lock, a maker for an unmaker, so it has begun.
The mental contact was terrifyingly intimate, a skeletal finger tracing the inside of her skull. Lyra swayed, her hand flying to her head. Kaelen's grip on her back tightened, steadying her. He looked toward the throne, his expression a carefully blank mask. He had not heard the thought, but he knew his sire had made contact. Lyra realized with a chilling certainty that she was not a pawn in a game between the scriptorium and the unwritten court. She was a piece in a much older, much larger game, and the player on the throne had just made his first move. He had brought her here after the unnerving audience with his court. He hadn't explained, simply led her up winding stairs to this quiet, isolated room, a sanctuary or a laboratory.
You speak of history as if it is a settled thing, a single, immutable truth you are sworn to protect. I want to show you what the scriptorium chose to forget.
He reached out, his long fingers hovering over the surface of the dark water. He did not touch it. Instead, he seemed to be focusing his will upon it. The water shivered, and light began to bloom within its depths.
There are voids in the timeline, holes left by our pruning. But there are other voids, too, voids of omission, entire chapters ripped from the book and burned so that the story reads cleaner. This is one of them.
An image formed in the pool. It was not a reflection, but a window into another time. Lyra gasped. She was looking down upon a city of breathtaking beauty. Spires of pearlescent white and soft rose quartz soared into a sky of brilliant azure. Graceful bridges arched over canals of crystal-clear water. Its people, clad in robes of woven light, moved with an unhurried elegance. The architecture was impossible, defying the laws of physics as she knew them, and the entire city seemed to hum with a gentle, benevolent magic.
I've never seen anything like this. What is this place?
It was called Althea, the city of shifting light. Its people were masters of sympathetic magic. They could weave emotions into structures, sing buildings into existence. They were allies of the scriptorium during the Great War.
Allies, there's no record of any city named Althea. No mention of a people who could practice such magic.
His face, reflected in the water next to hers, was a grim mask.
Precisely. When the war ended and the last Concord was forged, a choice was made. The raw, chaotic magic the Altheans wielded was deemed incompatible with the New World Order, the ordered, rigid reality your predecessors wanted to build. Althea was a variable that could not be controlled.
The beautiful image in the pool flickered. A shadow passed over the sun-drenched city. The people in the streets looked up, their expressions turning from serenity to confusion, then to terror.
What happened to them?
The Concord was not just a treaty. It was a spell, a piece of reality-defining magic on a global scale, and like all great magic, it had a cost. A price had to be paid to anchor it so forcefully in the timeline. The scriptorium chose not to pay it themselves. Instead, they erased Althea, its people, its culture, its magic, its very memory. They sacrificed an entire civilization on the altar of their New World Order, and then they erased the memory of the sacrifice itself.
The image in the water dissolved into screams and dust. The pearlescent spires crumbled, the crystal canals ran black. And then it was gone. The water was once again a placid, dark mirror, reflecting only her own horrified face. A lie of omission. A history built on a foundation of genocide. The first deep cracks spiderwebbed across the bedrock of her faith.
They told us the Eidolon were the monsters.
And we are, in our own way. But the most dangerous monsters, little scribe, are always the ones who convince the world they are saints.
The place had no name. Kaelen had simply called it the Fester. To Lyra, it felt like standing on the edge of a dying world. The psychic corruption was so thick she could taste it, a flavor of despair, disease, and curdled time. This, he had explained, was what happened when a corrupted memory was left to putrefy within the timeline. It didn't just fade away. It became a cancer, poisoning the ley lines, the very arteries of reality.
This was the memory of a plague that never was, a timeline aborted before its birth. But a memory so powerful, so filled with fear and death, cannot simply be erased. It must be consumed. Watch.
At a silent signal from Kaelen, the harvesters began the ritual. They knelt, placing their hands on the corrupted earth. A low, guttural chant began, a resonant hum in a language that made the bones vibrate. From the black wound on the earth, screaming, shadowy energy began to rise. It took on vague, writhing shapes, the ghosts of the plague dead, their faces masks of unending agony. It was a raw, undiluted torrent of suffering. The sight was horrific, an obscenity against the natural order as she understood it. Harvesters did not flinch. They opened their mouths and the shadows flowed towards them, drawn in as they inhaled. Lyra watched, horrified, as they fed on the diseased memory. The process was clearly agonizing. The vampires' bodies convulsed, their skin paling to a deathly white, black veins standing out on their necks and temples. They were taking the sickness into themselves, metabolizing the poison of a world that never existed to sustain their own immortal lives. It was not a feast. It was an exorcism. It was a duty. As the last of the screaming shadows was consumed, a profound silence fell over the wasteland. The black wound on the earth began to close. From its center, a soft, clean, silver-blue light began to pulse. The ley line was healing. The air cleared, the sickly green sky slowly brightening to a pale, hopeful gray. The stench of decay was replaced by the clean scent of rain on dust. One of the harvesters, a young female, collapsed and was immediately helped to her feet by another. The cost of the pruning was steep, paid from their own bodies, their own souls. Kaelen hadn't moved. He hadn't been watching the ritual. He had been watching her. waiting for the moment the truth would land. And it did with the force of a physical blow. The world tilted on its axis. The neat lines of her reality, good and evil, sacred and profane, scriptorium and eidolon, dissolved into an incomprehensible, terrifying gray.
You're not destroyers.
No,
You're surgeons.
He finally looked away from her, gazing at the now healthy ley line as it pulsed with clean, stable power.
we prune the diseased branches so the tree does not die, and your scriptorium, your high chronicler Thuron. They would see the whole forest burn to protect the sanctity of a single, poisoned leaf.
The full weight of her life's purpose, the sacred duty she had been willing to die for just days ago, crashed down around her. She hadn't been fighting for peace. She had been fighting for the disease. Reeling from Kaelen's revelation, Lyra had only one desperate hope, that he was lying, that this was all an elaborate deception. She needed proof, and there was only one person in the world she trusted to find it. Reaching out through the new, fragile architecture of the bond was a risk. It was like shouting into a canyon, unsure if only an echo would return or if something else might hear. She focused on her friend's psychic signature, a familiar warmth in the cold universe of her mind. Sloane. The Forbidden Archives. Section Gamma. Look for records on the Concord's formation. Anything about? Side effects. Collateral damage.
Come on. Where are you?
Sloane dodged the hanging chains, her candle flame guttering. Lyra's message had come through as a jumble of images and frantic emotion, but the core of it was clear. Lyra's in trouble. The Concord is a lie. She pulled scroll cases from their niches, blowing off centuries of dust, her heart pounding. The official histories were pristine, perfect, but Sloane had always known there was another library beneath the official one, the one where the ugly truths were buried. She found it. A single scroll case, sealed not with wax but with a psychic lock, designed to repel anyone but a master chronicler. But the lock was old, decaying. Sloane, using a trick of psychic resonance Lyra had taught her, vibrated her own energy at its frequency. The lock clicked open with a sigh of ancient air. She unrolled the vellum. The ink was faded, the script archaic. It was a personal log, penned by Eldrin, the Concord's primary architect. Her eyes scanned the page, widening in horror. Words leaped out at her. Unforeseen paradox, temporal instability. The Althean sacrifice was insufficient. The structure is feeding on itself. A self-correcting mechanism of catastrophic potential. Have hidden the flaw. Thuron insists it is not a flaw but a feature. A divine scourge to purify. It was all there, a confession, a warning. The Concord wasn't a shield. It was a time bomb.
Oh, Lyra's.
Finding some interesting reading, Initiate Sloane.
Sloane froze. She didn't have to turn around. The voice was calm, paternal, and utterly devoid of warmth. The shadow of High Chronicler Thuron fell over her, extinguishing the small light of her candle and plunging the vault into near darkness. His paternal facade was gone, stripped away to reveal the cold, hard certainty of the zealot beneath. She clutched the damning scroll to her chest, a useless gesture. She had walked right into the serpent's den. Back in Nicthamurin, Lyra felt a sudden, sharp severing of her connection to Sloane. The warmth vanished, replaced by a cold, terrifying silence. The psychic silence from Sloane was more terrifying than any scream. Lyra knew, with a certainty that settled like ice in her veins, that Thuron had her. She had sent her best friend into the lion's mouth. She turned to Kaelen, her face pale, her gray eyes stormy.
He has her. Thuron has Sloane.
Kaelen's jaw tightened. He had felt the abrupt end of her psychic broadcast through the bond, felt the spike of her fear and despair.
I told you it was a risk.
I had to know the truth.
And now you do. Your friend has likely paid the price for it.
Don't you talk about her like she's already dead. We have to get her back.
Storming the scriptorium is suicide. It is a psychic fortress. We would be undone before we passed the first ward.
The argument was a raw, desperate thing, their voices nearly lost to the howling wind. But beneath her fury and his pragmatism, a new dynamic was being forged. They were no longer captor and captive. They were allies, bound by a shared, catastrophic secret.
She found something. I felt it just before he cut her off. She found proof. The Concord. It isn't just a flawed memory hiding a lie.
Kaelen looked out at the horizon, at the endless war between sea and stone. His voice, when he spoke, was low, heavy with the weight of centuries.
No, it is much, much worse than that.
He finally turned to face her, his golden eyes holding hers. There was no more sarcasm, no more arrogance, only the grim finality of a truth too terrible to hide any longer.
The wrongness you felt at the altar, the thing your scriptorium walled off and hid at the Concord's core. It's a temporal paradox, a knot in the timeline so tight that reality itself is beginning to tear around it. The Concord isn't just preserving the memory of a peace treaty. It's acting as a containment field for a reality-ending bomb.
A time bomb.
One that is failing. The tremors you felt, the decay. That is the containment field breaking down. The paradox is leaking. It's slowly eating reality from the inside out. When it finally collapses, it won't revert the world to the way it was during the Great War. It will unmake everything. Time, space, history, memory, all of it. A clean slate of absolute nothing.
The wind shrieked, a keening cry that seemed to echo the death of worlds. The end wasn't coming in fire and blood. It was coming as a silent, creeping erasure. And the two of them, a heretic scribe and a monster from the shadows, were the only people in the world who knew. The apocalyptic truth lay between them, a dead weight in the quiet room. All of Lyra's anger had evaporated, leaving behind a cold, numbing dread. Her entire life, her purpose, her sacrifices, all in service of accelerating the end of the world. She wrapped her arms around herself, a futile gesture against a chill that came from within.
I know the particular weight of that revelation.
His voice was uncharacteristically soft. She looked up, and for the first time she saw past the ancient predator, past the arrogant prince. She saw the immense, crushing weariness in his eyes. He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision.
Let me show you.
He didn't move. He simply opened a door in his mind, using the bond not as an intrusion but as an invitation. He let her see. It was not a full memory, just a flash, a single searing image. A sky of crimson filled with fractured moons, a city of silver and glass turning to black dust, and a face, a woman with eyes the color of twilight and a sad, knowing smile, reaching a hand out to him as she dissolved into light. The feeling that came with it was a grief so pure and absolute it made the loneliness she'd felt before seem like a pale shadow. It was the pain of utter failure, the scar of a world he had not been able to save. The vision vanished, leaving Lyra breathless, her heart aching with a sorrow that was not her own. She saw him now. She saw the duty that drove him, the failure that haunted him. He was trying to prevent this world from becoming another ghost in his memory.
I'm sorry.
The words were inadequate, but they were all she had. He gave a slight shake of his head. His expression shuddered once more, as if regretting the moment of openness. But the wall between them had been breached. He took a step closer, and then another until he was standing over her. The air crackled. Every rational part of her screamed that this man was her enemy, her captor, a creature of the night. But the part of her that had just shared in his ancient grief saw only the survivor. He reached out, his hand moving with an agonizing slowness. He was going to touch her. She knew she should pull away, but she was frozen, her breath caught in her throat. His fingers, cool as marble, ghosted over her cheek, not quite making contact. The heat of her skin, the near touch, was more intimate, more charged than any kiss. She could feel the desperate restraint in him, the battle he was fighting with himself. His golden eyes were dark, filled with a tortured conflict. He pulled his hand back as if burned. His composure, for the first time, seemed to crack.
This bond will destroy us.
His words said one thing, but his eyes, locked on hers, said another. They said he was already lost. And as she looked at him, at this impossible, monstrous, beautiful man who carried the ghosts of dead worlds behind his eyes, she feared she was, too. It was not a memory. It was a live broadcast, delivered with the precision of a torturer's knife. Thuron's psychic presence was a cold, righteous weight, pinning her mind like an insect to a board. He wanted her to see. He wanted her to feel.
She is surprisingly resilient, your little friend, full of questions. It is a flaw I shall have to correct.
In the vision, Thuron stepped into the cell, his white and gold robes pristine against the grime. He looked down at Sloane with an expression of paternal disappointment that was more chilling than any rage.
Thuron, you bastard, let her go.
Lyra, fight it, don't let him in.
But the vision was absolute. Thuron extended a hand, and Sloane flinched but did not cry out as he touched her forehead. A wave of pain, sharp and clean, lanced through the vision, and Lyra felt an echo of it through the bond, making her knees buckle.
You have a choice, Keystone, an ultimatum, your friend's life for your obedience.
What do you want?
Return to the sanctum of the first dawn. Alone, you will perform the rite of permanence. You will use your full power to seal the Concord, to make its memory absolute and eternal. You will lock the paradox in place forever.
The demand was insane. To do as he asked would be to pull the pin on the temporal grenade to accelerate the final collapse. In Kaelen's study, Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide with horror, understanding dawning. Thuron knew. He knew about the paradox. He knew what would happen.
You know it will destroy everything. Why?
Thuron's mental voice was filled with a chilling, ecstatic certainty. The zealot's final, terrible truth.
The Concord is not a flaw. It is a divine instrument, a great cleansing that will scour the timeline clean of the Eidolon plague. When reality is unmade, they will be unmade with it. Their immortality will mean nothing against absolute oblivion. It is a worthy sacrifice. The mortal world will be martyred and reborn, free of their taint.
The vision dissolved, leaving Lyra gasping for air, leaning heavily against Kaelen. His hands were on her shoulders, his grip like iron. The fury rolling off him was a palpable force, a cold, killing rage directed at the man who would burn the world to kill his enemies. The ultimatum was clear: doom the world or sacrifice her friend. Thuron had left her no good choices. The aftermath of Thuron's psychic assault left the room charged with violent energy. Kaelen's instinct was simple, brutal, and direct.
We attack, we gather the court, and we throw ourselves at the scriptorium's walls. We will tear it down stone by stone until we find your friend.
My prince, that is madness. They will be waiting for us. Thuron wants you to attack. It would be a slaughter.
He used her to threaten me. He laid hands on what is mine. He will not live to see another night.
The possessive, unthinking declaration, what is mine, hung in the air. He hadn't meant to say it. It was a raw, instinctual reaction born of the bond, of seeing her pain. Lyra's head snapped up, her eyes locking with his. The argument was, for a moment, forgotten. The raw claim was a shock, a spark in the tinderbox of their forced intimacy.
No.
Her voice was quiet, but it cut through his rage.
We will not sacrifice your people for my friend, and I will not sacrifice the world for her. Thuron wants me to choose between two apocalypses. I will not give him the satisfaction.
There is no other option, Lyra. He holds all the cards.
Then we need to create a new one.
She leaned over the table, her hands flat on the cool stone map. Her eyes, usually the color of a winter sea, were blazing now with a desperate, brilliant light. The mind of the scriptorium's most gifted scholar was now untethered from its dogma, free to find a solution that was not written in any book.
He wants me to reinforce the memory. You wanted to consume it. Both actions are too blunt. They'll shatter the whole thing. But what if there's a third option?
Go on.
A keystone doesn't just reinforce a memory's outer shell. Our power allows us to enter the memory itself, to navigate its psychic structure. Thuron wants me to build up the walls of the prison. But what if, instead of reinforcing the prison, I perform surgery on the prisoner?
A stunned silence filled the war room. Kaelen stared at her, his golden eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding.
You want to go inside the Concord's memory core to find the paradox and, what, untie it?
Sever it, cut it out of the timeline like the tumor it is, not destroying the Concord, not sealing it, rewriting it, purging the sickness from the code.
That's impossible. The psychic feedback would be catastrophic. It would be like trying to perform surgery in the heart of a star.
I know.
It would kill you, Lyra. It wouldn't just drain you, it would burn your soul to ash. You would be utterly and completely annihilated.
It's better than the alternative. My life to save Sloane and the world.
Her expression was one of absolute, terrifying conviction. It was a martyr's plan, a scholar's solution, a sacrifice born of love for her friend and a desperate hope for a world she now saw with clear eyes. Kaelen looked at her, at this fragile human who was proposing to unmake and remake reality with her bare soul, and felt a terrible, wrenching feeling he couldn't name. It was not admiration. It was not despair. It was the furious, protective rage of a predator watching its mate walk willingly into a fire.
There has to be another way.
There isn't. This is the only path that saves everyone. We give Thuron what he wants. We go back to the cathedral, and then I do the one thing he never thought I would dare to do. I fix it.
Battle was brutal and swift. Kaelin's Eidolon moved with supernatural speed, their dark forms weaving through the moonlit ruins, but the silent chapter were their equal. They were fanatics, their minds shielded, their bodies honed into living weapons. Kaelen fought with a cold, desperate fury, his every move calculated to buy Lyra another second. He parried a glowing blade, spun, and drove his own through the chest of a warrior monk, his golden eyes never leaving Lyra's kneeling form. She was their only hope. He had to give her time. Lyra shut out the sounds of the battle, plunging her consciousness deep into the memory of the Concord. It was a universe of pure information, of laws and intentions woven into a complex tapestry. She bypassed the outer layers, the history of the treaty, the faces of its signatories. She dove deeper, toward the core, toward the walled-off sickness. The psychic pressure was immense, a crushing weight that threatened to extinguish her own identity. The paradox was there, a knot of screaming, contradictory timelines, a vortex of temporal chaos that fought her, that tried to suck her in and unmake her. She found the threads connecting it to the main body of the Concord and began to pull. The feedback was agony. It felt like her soul was being torn apart. A high-pitched scream ripped from her throat, a sound of pure, unendurable pain that cut through the din of the battle. Her body convulsed, the golden light around her flickering violently.
She's failing. The power is too much for her. She cannot contain it.
Kaelen saw her falter. He saw the light begin to dim. He roared, a sound of pure, primal fury, and carved a bloody path through 2 more guards, breaking the line. He was bleeding from a dozen shallow cuts, his fine black coat torn, but his eyes were blazing with a terrifying purpose. He reached her side just as she screamed again, her life force draining away, her physical body failing under the strain. He didn't hesitate. He dropped to one knee behind her, grabbing her hand, forcing their skin together. He slammed his own consciousness into hers through the resonance bond, a brutal, desperate intrusion. Her pain, her agony, crashed into him. He gritted his teeth, embracing it.
Lyra, don't use your soul, use mine.
She tried to pull away, to scream no, but he held her fast.
Anchor it to me. My soul is already a void. It has no light to extinguish. Let it burn me instead of you.
It was the ultimate sacrifice. His immortality was sustained by the consumption of energy, of memories. He was offering his own core, the very engine of his being, as fuel for her creative, world-shaping power, an act of uncreation to power creation. He was offering her his own damnation. Without hesitation, she accepted. She took the anchor of her world-rewriting spell and drove it deep into the cold, vast emptiness that was his soul. A torrent of black and gold energy erupted from them, engulfing them both in a silent, blindingly brilliant column of light. The blast had been silent, a wave of pure order washing over the chaos. There was no explosion, only a profound sense of correctness. The sour note in the timeline was gone. The knot was untied. The psychic pressure that had hung over the world for a millennium had simply vanished, leaving behind a clean, quiet peace. The paradox was severed. The last Concord was no longer a lie or a prison. It was stable. It was true. It was healed. Lyra's head was pillowed on his shoulder, her breathing deep and even. She was exhausted, drained to her very core, but she was alive. Her soul was intact. He had taken the brunt of the psychic backlash, letting it ground out in the vast, empty plains of his own immortal existence. It had hurt. More than anything in the last 500 years had hurt, and he would do it again in a heartbeat. He looked down at her, at the smudges of dirt on her cheek, the dark sweep of her lashes against her pale skin. In saving the world, She had irrevocably saved him from the lonely eternity he had been resigned to. She had given his void a purpose. He gently brushed a thumb over her cheekbone, feeling the warmth of her human skin. The bond between them was different now. Not a flaw, not an accident. It was a feature. It had been forged anew in the heart of creation, tempered by sacrifice. It was no longer a tether. It was a foundation. He could feel her sleeping mind, peaceful and quiet, nestled against his own. He had stood against armies, advised kings, and watched stars die. But nothing had ever felt as profound, as terrifying, as monumental as holding this mortal woman in his arms as the sun rose on a world they had made together. He bent his head, inhaling the scent of her hair, smoke, ozone, and the faint, clean smell of her own unique magic. The first true dawn in 1,000 years was breaking, and for the first time, he did not feel the urge to flee from its light. Sloane was safe. Rescued from the collapsing power vacuum of the scriptorium by Vesper's operatives, she was now a very vocal, very permanent guest of the unwritten court, already knee-deep in their forbidden library and arguing with ancient vampires about historical inaccuracies. Without Thuron, the scriptorium was in chaos, its zealotry broken, its great lie exposed. The masquerade was shattered. Mortals knew something had happened, a silent shift in the world they couldn't name, and the immortal world was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. They teetered on the brink of a new kind of war or a new kind of peace. Kaelen reached out, his touch gentle as he turned her face toward him. His thumb traced a new, faint scar on her temple, a tiny, silver line shaped like a lightning strike, the only physical mark left from the day she rewrote reality.
You paid a great price to save this world, chronicler.
We paid it.
But I am Eidolon. We are creatures of debt and balance. A price was paid, yes, and I will have my due.
His words were not a threat. They were a promise. A statement of fact as immutable as the new Concord. The air thickened, the sound of the waves and the cry of the gulls fading into the background. There was only the space between them, charged with 1,000 unspoken things, with the shared agony and triumph of their ordeal. His golden eyes were intense, burning with a possessive fire that was no longer conflicted or tortured. It was certain. It was absolute. He had offered his soul to save hers. And now, he was coming to claim it. He lowered his head, his lips hovering a breath from hers. He didn't ask. He wouldn't. The old rules were dead. The time for permission and politics was over. This was something more fundamental, a claiming.
You are mine, Lyra.
And as his mouth finally met hers, it wasn't the end of a war. It was the beginning of an empire. Oh my gosh, you guys, my heart is still absolutely pounding from that ending. Prince Kaelen, huh? You are mine, Lyra. Yeah, I'd let him claim my soul any day. And when he offered his own for her, my God, did you feel that scene where he was just holding her, those glowing scars fading? And Sloane arguing with ancient vampires, bless her. Thuron is gone. What a mess, but what a beginning. You do not want to miss what happens next. Here at Crimson Tales, all our stories are 100% original, created just for you. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single moment as Lyra and Kaelen's story unfolds.